do is we're gonna start. All right, so I'm just gonna start recording, and we're just gonna play it by ear. Fuck it, who cares? All right, excuse my language. So that's not the one that I want. I want the circle. All right, so this whole thing is really just going to be about the asymmetry of cancel culture and one of the interesting problems that occurs with it. One of the things that I have observed, and this is where one of my disagreements with the behaviors I've been observing on X recently haven't been a big fan of. Not because reciprocation isn't warranted for behavior. That is not the problem. The problem is the asymmetrical nature of it. One of the interesting things, so I'm gonna give you a little picture analogy just so you guys can understand exactly what I'm talking about, so you can see it. Okay, so right now I've got three shapes. I've got two rectangles. I got an oval circle. It's a misshaped circle. Let's all be honest with ourselves. All right, so in this one, we're gonna call this sucker. We're gonna actually put it to 14. Let's see if we can find Helvetica, because that's just a because I'm just an autist and I like, nope, we don't even have Helvetica. That's unfortunate. All right, so we're gonna call this Village 1. Good, I can type. Holy moly, I didn't misspell. So we're gonna call this Village 1, and we're gonna call this Village 2. All right, so interestingly enough, Village 1 and Village 2 are part of a complex system. All right, so this is just, these are two nodes interacting with each other in a complex network. Let's just say this is some random third world country. I'm not going to give it a name. We're not going to worry about the name. The name's irrelevant. It's just understand it's Village 1, Village 2. Village 1 and Village 2 are engaging in reciprocal behaviors. So Village 1 will have a disagreement with Village 2. Village 2 reciprocates back with a similar disagreement at the same level. There's no major escalation that's occurring. You'll see what I'm talking about when I get to the very end of this, and it's actually really kind of cool to understand. And you can disagree with me all you want. I understand. I'm just trying to explain it to you, at least with the models that I have. This is how I can explain it. So when we look at the behaviors of Village 1 and Village 2, there's no major escalation that's occurring. Interestingly enough, one of the things that occurs with cancel culture when we see it in the United States, in the digital layer on the internet specifically, that's the internet, just so that everybody is aware, so it's not confusion, right? What ends up happening is Village 1 is pretty much on its own fighting against Village 2, but Village 2 actually has a little bit of support. So Village 2 has direct connectivity, and in this case, let's call this bad boy, and you're going to like it when I type it, the U.S. government. We're going to say the USG. Has the USG to support it, but what does the USG also have to support itself? It's part of a larger network of other smaller networks and other smaller nodes, and all of these nodes are interconnected to each other, and all of their interactions are occurring simultaneously. Now, say Village 1 and Village 2 have a disagreement with each other in what they're doing, and Village 2 decides, I'm going to up the ante in the reciprocation. I'm going to up the ante on this, and I'm going to have the USG engage in an attack. Boom, we call this a bombing. Let's just say the word, let's just say boom, okay? So let's just call it a boom. So it goes boom onto Village 1, and Village 1 goes, hey, that seems a little unfair, but Village 2 goes, hey, look, you guys are technically politically an outsider. You're not actually part of my network. You're not part of my team, part of my crew. So it's actually not really my problem. It's your problem. That's what you get for not agreeing with me. That's actually part of your issue. You don't agree with me. So you don't actually get access to the really cool parts of the network. In this case, this could be like this one right here could just be bank, right? This could be military. In this case, this is industry, right? And we call this tech and innovation information domain, right? And what's really cool is all of these different nodes, they're all interacting with each other. You know, industry requires military, also requires tech, and so on and so forth. Tech, US government. It's just one massive network of interconnecting nodes that are all interacting with each other simultaneously, both upwards and downwards. If we imagine a hierarchy, right? Right? They're all interacting within the hierarchy, and they have three primary domains: social, economic, political. They have three primary domains. The really cool thing about it, understand this asymmetry that occurs. I say cool, but it's actually really quite terrible. One of the interesting things that we saw with the digital layer in relation to asymmetrical warfare of cancel culture in the social domain was that most of the, you would call it left, but I call it strictly just liberal value structure. So we would call this whole sector liberal value structure. This whole group right here, this is all a liberal value structure. So let's actually type in liberal value structure. I personally like to call it set. So it's a set of values. So it's a liberal value set. And then this, let's just say this is conservative, whatever that even means. Conservative. And the reason I say it is because we don't really stick to. There's no real conservative behavior set that's occurring. Oh, let's cut that out. Okay. There's no real consistent conservative behavior set because America wasn't really founded strictly as a conservative country in a lot of ways. It had elements of conservatism at its core with its founding. And you could see it you could see it in a lot of the original documentation, a lot of the original writings from the founding fathers. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. That's not really part of the whole thing. What's actually occurring is Village 2 already has access to a whole extra set of resources, and it's politically adjacent, right? So it's all politically adjacent in values, as well as socially and economically adjacent. So what ends up occurring is when you see cancellation from one direction to the other, when you see, right, so from the liberal value set attacking the conservative value set, what you end up seeing is the liberal value set has access to being able to cancel banking, to cancel credit. You can essentially just attack them from. You can attack a conservative at all layers of his social life. You can even manage to get law involved. The legal system gets involved. So you get the economic, the social, and the political all attacking simultaneously, which is really interesting because when conservatives are attempting to re-engage, right, this would be what we call reciprocation. Reciprocation. I was hoping I was going to be able to spell that one right, or that was going to be a disaster. When you have reciprocation, what ends up occurring is the only domain that they actually are trying to reciprocate this behavior in, the only domain that ends up getting really deeply affected is in the social domain, which is really interesting. You see this when the Home Depot woman that gets canceled out of the system. She gets canceled specifically on an economic level, but really theoretically, she's not really canceled socially either. She's not really rejected by a good portion of her family. That's assuming she still has family. She seemed a little bit on the older side. That's not an insult. It's not meant to demean or denigrate her in any way. I just want everybody to understand the asymmetry of the pattern that's occurring here, right? Conservatives don't actually have access. Conservatism doesn't have access to the social or the economic domain. So when they engage in this cancellation of somebody like Destiny, you get a half measure cancellation. It's not an entire, right? Because now you can't actually send power at him. You can't do that because technically he's politically adjacent. He would be part of, like when we take somebody like Destiny, for example, he's part of the liberal value set, right? So he's actually politically adjacent to power. He's not antithetical to power. So what you actually end up seeing is a asymmetry in the way cancel culture actually functions, which is why it's really interesting because a lot of the conservatives in the United States, and that's again, this is probably a different conversation for a different video, different time, and I'm certain I'm probably going to get a decent bit of pushback on this position and this understanding. Now, I also understand this is terribly janky. This also not a professional. It is fascinating to see this asymmetry that's occurring under the presumption that it's, well, they did it to us, so we should be able to do it back to them. But you don't have political adjacency. You don't have power to do so, and your network isn't willing to support you either, your so-called network. This is why a lot of political opposition gets really frustrated with political power, because you find out that if we are going to, let's say we do a new one all over again, don't save. So we're going to do a new one all over again. We say we take, let's take the two political parties. Let's just say boom here's the Dems, and here's the Repubs, right? Boom, right? So we take, and we take this one, and we go, and then you are like blue, and then we take that. No, I don't even know what I'm doing. I am silly. Nope, we're not even gonna try it. You know what? Let's do that instead. Let's make our lives a little bit easier. So what we do is we make a blue square, we make a blue rectangle, and then we click red, and then we go, we make a blue rectangle, and then we click this, and then we go red rectangle. Ha ha ha! We figured it out. We're doing it on the fly, boys. Now, interestingly enough, if we are to take the concept of globalism or global homogeneity, what it actually has done is it has captured about a majority of both parties. It's actually captured a vast majority of both parties, and we can see this in the expression of legislation that gets pushed throughout the United States government, and we can also observe this as a byproduct of foreign policy influence and foreign policy that gets expressed by a vast majority of the members of both parties. So if we consider this Dems, and we pop that out, we consider this pubs. Let's just call them the pubs, Republicans. So the Dems and the pubs, right? And what you end up observing is that this. Let's take a downward arrow, right? So what we do is we do downward arrow, and then we go here and we say uniparty. Boom. Guess what? You just observed a uniparty. You observe a single party model. Now what you end up getting is these extremes on the edges. This stops being a horizontal line, and the whole thing becomes vertical. So the whole concept of horseshoe theory is kind of funny, because what you actually end up observing is converging value sets. So you end up having a converging set of values. So it stops being a horizontal line that turns vertical. And what you end up getting is, if we go back to a new, we don't save, what you end up getting is this really interesting bifurcation vertically. And then you end up getting this cut off that cuts right in the center, and you have out of power, and then you have in power. And this is the whole point of the asymmetry. So when dissidents start getting involved in cancel culture, what ends up happening is it's singular agents without a major node. It's singular agents without a major node getting access or attempting to engage in cancellation of those that are adjacent to power. And that's how you get this weird asymmetrical behavior. This is part of the reason why it's a little weird to engage in cancel culture if you're on the political outs, because you actually don't have a lot of network support to be able to engage in that without just sounding like a crazy person. This is why a lot of people that are politically adjacent are also able to make the statement, let's all calm down. We don't need to start behaving like crazy people, because it's like technically they don't want to escalate that as much as you're trying to escalate it, because they've also seen the reciprocation of what happens when you escalate from a political consensus standpoint. Because what's the one domain that they don't have access to right now? So we have 3 primary domains in any complex system, right? 3 primary domains. Let's go economic. Right, and then we have political. Ooh, okay, I was about to fuck that all up. And then you have the social, and they're all interconnected. All right, so right, and they're all doing this, and they're all interconnected with each other. All right, now, if we're gonna think about, so I'm gonna use blue to refer to globalism. Globalism owns these two, right? Which means this is the battleground. This is the only place political opposition actually really has left to fight, because we've seen the asymmetrical nature of cancel culture and how it only impacts smaller elements, especially if we're engaging with smaller agents that are just politically adjacent to power. And that's a really important thing to understand. So I hope this explains sort of my issue with it. I am not saying, just that we're 100% clear on this, I am not saying that there aren't consequences for behaving in a manner that is discivilizational or dysfunctional, right? Something that fundamentally causes instability in the system, because we want this system to maintain as much stability as possible, preferably all of these grounds would be fair game. Preferably this is all fair game. When you actually have a complete breakdown of the complex system, this all becomes fair game. Sorry, I should start that all over again. Preferably, we don't want this to have all three domains being fair game. We actually want all three domains being ultimately aligned in vision and purpose. That's a stable system with a clear-cut shared value set. That is a stable complex system when it has a shared value set and all three domains are politically aligned. But what happens when the capture occurs into two separate domains? Now you have a really weird asymmetry, which is how we're also able to observe that most of America's political opposition, interestingly enough, what you would call the left actually has a lot of shared values with folks that you would call the right. And I'm not talking about behavioral patterns, I'm talking strictly on what is desired when it comes to a positive vision for the future, weirdly enough. And I've written some of that down. So I've written some of that down in here. We have things like emergent opposition and its current values, such as reduction of policy impact via third parties. This also refers to non-governmental organizations, enforce law that limits foreign influence and lobbying of governmental employees, limit special interest non-governmental agencies and organizations, as you can see. We also want de-evolving wealth. This is, weirdly enough, this is that left class war section. Weirdly enough, is shared values. It's actually a shared value, which is pretty wild if you think about it in the context of the greater system as a whole. So I hope this video helps. I said I would do a video, and hopefully this whole thing doesn't get completely screwed up on recording and comes through fine. Thank you very much. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.